Hi everyone. So I hope it's not your last event though. Apparently, it's no pressure. So today I would like to talk a little bit about magic and real world and fears and emotions we may have when it comes to AI, and share with you what kind of roller coaster I've been on. Because it's been quite a few eventful months. And even when I was asked to give this talk, I almost asked it to be almost last minute that we have a check, because I didn't know what the topic will be, because the world was changing every 2 weeks and something new is getting out, and I'm like, I have no idea. So let's go on this ride. First of all, this will be a little prologue about magic and why is this called A Fortune Teller Told Me. Well, there's this book. This book is A Fortune Teller Told Me, and it's written by an Italian journalist that in 90s got a prophecy that he should not travel by air. And this is a real book and a true story. And that was a foreign affairs journalist. So his boss was like, yeah, what kind of foreign affairs journalist you are if you come to the spot and the war is over or the conflict is over. And nevertheless, he still did this experiment. So he did not travel by air, and he traveled by trains, buses, boats, and so on. And it's a fascinating journey about the slowness of life and about the real life and real people and seeing how everyone is bored, for example. And I do think it sort of connects with this very fast-paced world where we sort of sometimes hope just to go to a cabin, go into a forest, and just turn everything off because it's so overwhelming. So with this sentiment, this talk will go, but it will also share my journey. But there's one part here as well that you may be wondering about. It's fortune tellers. What's that about? Well, I mean, I have weaknesses as well. So sometimes I go to a fortune teller. And I went to a tarot card reader not that long time ago. And that tarot card reader said, your life will be like a roller coaster, your work included. And I was like, darn it, I don't know, does that sound good or not? Is that a generic phrase that they throw and they say, oh yeah, it will be like that? Well, actually, come to think of it, it was like that. So this is a graph of my feelings about AI. And I do think that it was like that. So I had all kinds of ups and downs when it comes to it. And this graph I drew myself on with pen and paper, the roller coaster. So let's start with the stage 1, the skeptic. I am known to be a little bit annoyed by tools, and when people come and say, oh yeah, this is the silver bullet and it will solve everything, I'm like, come on. We're not solving even basic problems. You cannot talk to each other. How can you solve something with a certain tool? And when it comes to AI, I also thought the same. We spoke about it 5 years ago. We're still talking about it. Sure, it is becoming more and more helpful, but it is still a tool. And in January 2026, I gave a talk, which is, sorry, you're far from getting replaced by AI. But there I was a little bit strict, which I also tend to be when it comes to QA, because I think that it's not just testing and sitting in your cubicle or writing Selenium tests. That QA is much more. And that is uncomfortable for some people. So I think sometimes I'm like a trigger witch. I say things and I trigger. For example, that QA is the opposite of a gatekeeper, that you should enable and you should actually make yourself obsolete, which sounds like a nightmare for some people. It's like, what? I should make myself obsolete, but it's my job. Come on, what are you talking about? Well, maybe you should try and see how it goes. And then that QA is not just test cases, test plans, or bug reports, that it is strategy, systems, spotting bottlenecks, risk management. Why is that triggering? Because it's hard. It's much easier to talk about test cases because it's tangible. It's very easy to understand it. But when it comes about risks, systems, you're like, okay, fine, but that's philosophy. What is it? Then I also would say that many of us are intellectually lazy and too comfortable. And it's a little bit funny that we are expecting to have the same job in 10 years doing the same thing. Really? Come on, people. And maybe we have been a little bit in this field where you could get fairly easily in, right? And stay there just because you can write a few lines of code. But now the age is a little bit kicking us in the back and saying, you have to do a little bit more than that. And that's scary, and I get it. and work on processes to prevent issues instead of just detecting. That's also a little bit triggering, because what do you mean? How can I actually prevent an issue and not just detect it? Well, that's systems, right? And lastly, what the main thought that I gave in that talk as well was that AI amplifies the messes. And most problems are human problems, not the tool ones. And that is also hard to hear, because come on, this tool is about to solve everything and do everything for me. Well, even if I thought that, and I still think that, but there were parts in this my roller coaster journey where I got very excited about AI as well. So let's go to my first ride and my first high here. So I did reach my first whoa when it comes to AI. A while back, I was like, okay, I should try it out, right? I cannot just live under the rock and say, oh, it doesn't exist. I will go and try it out. So I went to Claude Code, and there, first of all, I was like, okay, I will connect it to Chrome. I connected it to Chrome, I connected it to Jira, and I gave it a ticket. And I said, hey, how would you test it? And it generated to me like a comprehensive list of test cases, and not just like some very happy paths. And I was like, of course I had to tune it a little bit and say, please include some special characters and so on, but this is pretty cool. And this is what some of the QAs I know wouldn't think of. And that was really nice, and I was like, okay, then test. And it tested fairly quickly, much quicker than a human would test that ticket. But the funniest thing was these sometimes moments when it would stumble into some kind of obstacle. For example, it was testing something on the UI, and at some moment, when I looked at the logs, it was like, oh, actually, the app crashed. But I was like, I'll use the API instead. I was like, wow, what? Like, if you're testing something, the UI crashes, you're like, okay, UI crashed, maybe I'm blocked, or like, I'll report a bug, that's critical. And it was like, no problem, UI crashed, I'll find a way. And then it used API. And I was like, it was quicker anyway, so I tested it that way. I was like, whoa, what? And it was really, really impressive. And then it also could generate certain commands. And for example, for one of the backend tickets, it gave me a list of curls that you can just run. And I was like, awesome. And then I can save this. I can make it a skill that we mentioned, right? And I can add it to a Jira ticket, so anyone who's testing it next, when it gets fixed, can be like, okay, I have the skill, I install it, I just say, please test this ticket, and it will just run these curl commands and give us the result. Wonderful. So I was like, whoa, this is really good. But then I was like, it could replace some people. And then I was like, are we screwed? Because really, some people will be really, really screwed. And I was like, am I good enough? Can I do something more? And then I felt, okay, there's so much going on, and I know nothing. What's happening? All those terms thrown around. Then 1 week we're using Claude and I'm creating skills. The other week routines get out. Oh my God, I don't know anything about that. I go to Anthropic, there are courses that are free, but then there's like, you start watching one and there's like 5 more that you have to watch, and it's agents and it's all kinds of things. And I'm like, I'm not sure if, am I actually like with the wave, or am I so behind? So I was like really overwhelmed. However, the more I learned, the more I tried, I started a little bit changing my perspective, because first I was like, okay, this is overwhelming, I don't know. But what do? Well, you go and you learn and you get curious. But the more I tried, the more I was playing around with Claude, the more I realized that actually it would go in loops. It wasn't that great, and it needed lots of rechecks. Also, context was king, so you really needed like human context. And sometimes it would miss that context. And that was actually coming back to the same thing, that the same mindset, the quality mindset, knowing the domain are still important, and you need to define it. Without it, it's just, sure, with some tickets, it's great, with others, not that great. And then tokens, oh my goodness, I felt a little bit gross. I don't know why, but it grosses me out. It's sort of a privilege, right? That your company has a budget, and then you can use some kind of AI tool. And then there were some companies that actually used up all their AI budget for the year, I heard recently. And they are also increasing pricing models, right? So they are actually using this situation, right, to make money. And I was also like finishing my usage, right, in a few hours, and I was like, cannot do anything now, I need to wait a week, right? And that's really frustrating. So when it comes to this, I was like, okay, is it actually that intelligent, or is it just an illusion? I do think it's a little bit of an illusion of conscious intelligence, because agents, skills, and the context, in the end, it's you who needs to define it. It's not just there. Sure, there are some generic things, but you still need to define it really well. And spoiler alert, we're pretty bad at it. Normally, we're bad at it. And then good practices in coding and testing, again, you need to define it. Sure, it can try, it can do a lot of great things. But if you want to be very, very good, you still will need to define it and a little bit nudge it and change the direction of it. And lastly, we're actually back to this, what we actually want and what good means for us, right? So we do need to define that, and it's a very hard conversation. There's a concept of Conway's law, likely you heard about it, so I did not add the definition, but it says that we mirror our the architecture and the software we build mirrors the information flow in the company. So if your company has a system that's a little bit messy, right, it will just amplify it, right? So you will be just in more mess. So if you already don't have collaboration practices, how are you going to spread it through your company? So here I go to this sort of a slump and lower part of the roller coaster, which is sort of back to the basics. So I'm like, nope. Still similar things are important, and basics still really matter. So if you think about developer experience or an overall employee experience in a software company, what matters to it? And the funny thing is that now suddenly companies are like, ooh, agentic experience matters. It's like, what does it mean even? But if you think about developer experience and agentic experience and draw a Venn diagram, how would it look like? Venn diagram is about circles interacting, right? It's like, well, how much is it overlapping? There was this idea that actually maybe they are a circle because they completely overlap. So the things like documentation that would give to a new developer that joins the team, we don't have it. Suddenly we need to write it for an agent so that agent could actually use it and build something really great. So that's a little bit sad, right? And Dan North recently said that the new developer, maybe a fairly junior developer, is a chaotic good. But an agent, at best, is chaotic neutral. Because it doesn't care that much. It's not as curious, right? It's not as accountable. There's even a book called The Unaccountability Machine. Because it can say, oops, yeah, I deleted these files, or I did this command. So that's not the end of the journey. I still got another high. So I got hooked again on the AI stuff, because I got to work and build a pet project. And here is a typo that was annoying me, but then after discussing a bit, we left it. So it's for sure, so now I'm from the hood. So the idea was to make a valuable thing for the company by taking the website and using Devin connection to GitHub and everything. So basically how it worked, there was this example website, and then they just said, okay, there's Devin account. Devin is like a developer helper. And you can just write it and say, hey, please implement this new function. And then we started playing around with it, and it was fascinating because I say, hey, please implement this avatar option that I can add an avatar. And then Devin implements it, creates a pull request, reviews it itself, then tackles the review comments as well and fixes that, as well as tests it and basically just fires up the browser. I was like, whoa, this is great. And then reports the bugs and then fixes those bugs. When everything is tackled, then sure, you can take a look at it and merge it. So all I did was wrote prompts, and then I would merge, and then I would see the website change. And that was fascinating. And I was like, ooh, I'll add the avatar function. You can add your picture. Then I was like, maybe you could add a different avatar if you want. Then I started thinking, okay, what else should I add? And then they said also, make it valuable. And I was like, what does it mean? And I was like, I don't know. And it was really hard. But then this gave me a huge lump of adrenaline because I started fixing things, I was implementing things, and I was like, oh, I need to do this and that and that and that. And I got like really hooked, and I started having multiple sessions running because I was like, I need to implement this other thing, and this is slow, this is still testing, this is still running. And then at some point, a developer friend writes to me and says, Lina, you merged without testing. I was like, darn it. I'm a QA, and I'm merging without testing. And it happened to me because I rushed so much that it happened twice, by the way. One time, Devin apparently was testing and found a bug, and I didn't wait for it to finish testing because I wanted to merge it and see it. Well, that also is part of their problem, right? Because I couldn't see the changes until it got merged. So I couldn't test locally. So then I was like, it's so slow, I'll just merge it, and then I'll see it. And then, yeah, there was another pull request for that bug fix. And another time, I broke the CI tests. And that was more painful because with each build, it would keep failing, and I didn't know in which PR I broke it. So then I had to go back. And then again, and then first I blamed GitHub because we also used all the tokens there, apparently. So I was like, okay, maybe we used the tokens, that's why it's red. But we didn't, it was me. So that was a little bit embarrassing. And I realized that, yeah, reality is hitting a little bit again. That, first of all, what is value? Is it valuable that I have this avatar option? Then you can add an avatar. Is it value for the company? And secondly, I was like, how can I make it maintainable and good? Because I really got this rush. I wanted to get this out and develop. And it's a very hard question because once we started refactoring, it would use up all the tokens. So then actually I was like, okay, I cannot do anything. I need to wait a few days again. And that was frustrating because then instead of Devin, we would start using codecs and then try to play around the system, right? So we had to a little bit, there's this quote, right? We don't have the money, so we have to think. So I sort of felt like that. I was like, okay, what do I need to do so I actually can use this and get this working? So apparently, yeah, if it tests on the cloud and it's connected to the cloud, maybe you could then do it locally. So there are some tips and tricks that you can do that a bit faster. Nevertheless, then we get the message that in around 2 hours, we generated 10,000 lines of code and burned also $400 above the usual budget. And it was 2 hours, right? That was maybe 2-3 people that used it, and it wasn't that intense. So then I was like, what? I used up all my usage of tokens, plus we also went overhead and burned $400. That was crazy. And then I felt a little bit not nice, because I also did not make that maintainable over code, and we sort of trusted it a little bit too much. So when it comes to trust, that was mentioned today as well, it's sort of unwarranted trust. It's not earned at all, right? So first of all, 10,000 lines of code. That's a little bit scary, no? It's very easy to make a huge mess with 10,000 lines of code. And then 10,000 lines of code that we don't understand either. We just kept on merging it. Then maintaining that system that we don't understand, it's really hard. And doesn't it actually sound familiar? Come to think of it, of the projects and companies you worked in, what are the worst parts usually there? Some legacy API that some consultant 20 years ago implemented, and nobody understands it, and then you still need to call them to understand it. Those parts are really difficult. And now we're actually making it as a reality, everyday thing. And then one developer actually told me that he really doesn't like the AI-generated stuff because that code has no soul. It was like, when you actually check and review code that's actual human wrote, it's learning, it has certain patterns, you understand it. When it's AI's code, it's something like, well, yeah, I don't think it cares. Does it care? Does it care about the conventions? Of course, you can tune it, you can make it care about things, but not always, right? So the developer was like, yeah, but it's sort of gross that you need to review it. So with all this, I feel like we should be even more suspicious as things are moving fast and people get excited about it and go on the wave. Because that whole pet project was born because leadership got so excited, they said, oh, we can do everything with AI. And then the person that was tasked with this was like, okay, wait a moment. Like, what is value? What do you want to do? Because that is the big part as well, specifying what you want to build. And they didn't do that. So it came back to the leadership and saying that, okay, we have no idea, right? So if we just go wildly and do whatever, that's what it turns out. It turns out as whatever and really strange. But you can add your avatar, so that's a great functionality. But when it comes to trust, the trust landscape is really changing. And the one thing that I learned as well recently is, so I work in open source project, and we have an app competition. So everyone can submit an app. And this year, we got a lot of apps that were suspicious. And some of them were with malware. And there has been quite a few security incidents overall, and a lot of them are AI assisted. So in open source, it used to be that it's accept by default. So we feel like, okay, you're a human, you're writing code, you are sincere about it, you care about the product, so we will accept this by default and we will merge it. But right now, some of the open source projects also stopped taking in the contributions because there were a lot of bogus requests and changes from AI-assisted development. So deny by default is becoming a new reality, which is a little bit sad. So this leads me to this balancing act stage, stage 5. So I may have been on this ride, and maybe I'm a little bit there as well still, because I know it exists, I know we're using it, I know it's useful, it's fascinating, it's exciting, but actually these basics that we always knew are still there and even more relevant, and we still need to know that. All that knowledge that we have is useful. There are articles like Harness Engineering, and that's a great article, by the way. I really recommend reading it. It's super interesting. And I was like, oh, that was one of the concepts I didn't know about, right? I was like, harness engineering. Oh my goodness, I really need to read it. But then once I started reading it, there were these concepts that I knew about. Like it even says timing, keep quality left. I was like, what? Keep quality left, that's shift left. Okay, that's old news. Then it speaks about good development practices. At some point, the author says, yeah, well, all these things, any good developer should know anyway. I was like, yeah, exactly. And then it mentions feed forward, which is the opposite of feedback, which is a very beautiful word. But that sounds like preventing issues, right? Or having some kind of practices that are giving you signals and information before feedback does. And also working with systems and processes. Well, isn't that the QA work in a sense? And what we should do anyway? But if you look at the whole graph of harness engineering, it looks like this. So there's a feed forward part, and there's a feedback part. So feed forward part is all the guides. And that's a lot of context. That's writing. That's knowing the system. That's the domain, right? The how-tos, the ref docs. These are things that we're actually quite bad at in the companies. So, and now we have to define that and then give it to the agent, as well as we have sensors and feedback, which is logs, and static analysis and so on that we could feed back to the agent, and agent then could improve itself. So a lot of those things sound really great, but it also isn't that new, actually. Another article that I really liked was from OpenAI, and they were sharing about the project they did. So they were creating a product with 0 lines of manually written code. It's a fascinating article, and the challenges they faced as well are quite interesting, but some parts were quite funny for me. So in one part it says that our bottleneck became human QA capacity. So what they did is they were developing really fast, but they still needed someone to check. And then at some point it became a bottleneck. So one of the biggest challenges, if you read this article, it's not development, it's not lines of code, it's actually the QA. And this is why I think the QA is so important, and everyone here, like, is there even a question how to make something useful? I think it's an opportunity for us, right? So we are very useful because they are defining the world, right? And how to actually evaluate quality. And then they come up with, of course, harness engineering, which are certain practices, right? That we get feedback from the systems. Another part that was quite nice also was that human taste is captured once, then enforced continuously on every line of code. This also lets us catch and resolve bad patterns on a daily basis, rather than letting them spread in the code base for days or weeks. So this is more like being reactive, right? And also reacting to humans and gathering their feedback and actually building it into the system. So those things, they don't look that scary, right? It makes sense what's happening there. So all of this for me is like the work of QA, right? We're improving systems and processes. We're spotting the bottlenecks. That's what we're doing. So all those signals, feed forward, feedback, context awareness, risk management, that's the core of a QA anyway. So in the epilogue, I would like to talk about the real magic. What's there? So what do fortune tellers and the times of AI rising have in common? It's actually that it's a feeling of uncertainty. That when you are uncertain about something, to manage uncertainty, you go to a fortune teller. You want someone to tell you that it's going to be okay. And with the rise of AI, I feel a lot of my friends, at least, or people I know, they would say, they would be a bit scared, and they would think, okay, what's going on? Where am I? And there's also a lot of uncertainty. Even when it comes to agentic testing in the pyramid, there's now the term uncertainty tolerance, that you should have uncertainty tolerance. And it's really scary, actually. So I think it's normal that sometimes we want to have answers, but we don't have those answers, because that is life. Life is ups and downs. And when I reflect on this talk, I feel like it sounds 5 stages. And I was like, it's 5 stages of grief. And I was like, does it even map when I created it? And 5 stages of grief are denial, bargaining, anger, depression, and acceptance. I was like, oh, it sort of does, right? So I started in a bit of a denial, and then I went to acceptance. And every stage is sort of necessary for you to go through. When it comes to 5 stages of grief as a concept, it's also called 5 stages of death. And that made me think of one of the tarot cards. Death card is really feared in tarot because you start thinking, oh, okay, this is the worst thing that could happen, right? Someone may die. But one of the explanations of it is actually that it's a card of transformation. It's a beautiful card, because that means something is changing, something is ending, and something is beginning, and then this change is coming, and the transformation is coming, and you feel it really matches here. But as my friend says, oh, hell no, I'm tired of transformations. I don't want more transformations. And I really feel it, because I'm also tired of transformations. But I do think that's sort of our life. Life is hard. Life is everything, and you cannot say that, okay, now I have this profession and then I will work the same profession. Maybe I won't. And it is a scary time, it is an uncertain time, but I do think we are sort of okay, we will figure it out. But we have to try, and that is becoming cool again. So there's one video that I really like, it's about pop culture, and it's talking about how trying became cool again. And it's basically saying that we used to be in the world where generic or just doing something can make you viral. But now it's not enough. You have to be authentic, you have to be different, you have to be unique in order to stand out. And that's what we start appreciating. And I do think in the world of AI, where a lot of text is generated, where you open LinkedIn and it's the same post after the same post, and I don't know why they added different paragraphs, right, for each sentence. But it's just not sincere at all. So I think that my advice for all of you would be that in the world where there's plenty of generic, average things, forget the nonchalant. Get wild, quirky, imperfect, and amplify that. And you do have already the skills, and each of you has different skills. And that is what won't be replaced by the AI. It actually will be your power. So think about that and what actually differentiates you. And the last thought I would have is the only person you should trust is yourself. But if you go to fortune tellers, I will not judge you. So thank you. I also have the list of resources, if that's interesting for you. And I went down the rabbit hole, and there's lots of other very interesting talks and articles if you're interested. And if you want to talk about, I don't know, magic, connect with me on LinkedIn.
I feel like in your case, it's not the rabbit hole, but it's crystal ball.
Is it? Okay, thanks.
All right. Surprisingly, not a lot of questions, but most of the questions are actually compliments. So, great presentation.
Thank you.
Exclamation mark. The second one begins the same with the compliment, great presentation, and there is a question on top of that. So, when seeing how AI works and the costs of AI, do you think environmental impact should also be considered, not just the monetary cost?
Yeah, that was another aspect that I almost wanted to put it in, but then it becomes like a very long talk. But yeah, I had this slide, and Justus was like, I don't like this because it's I hate. And it had I hate, cost, and then environmental impact and other things.
You are putting words in my mouth. That's not what I said.
But yeah, I wanted to include this, but it just expands the topic much more. But yeah, there's a huge impact of that. And then even in one of the breaks, we were talking that, and I don't know, I'm now paraphrasing, so sorry if I'm quoting quoting it wrong, that there was so many servers, and apparently there was a shortage of water in one of the places, right? And I think we are living in a very privileged country, right? We cannot even imagine this sometimes. But there are countries that already have this problem, and we're sort of a capitalist world. And then I really hope that we're not starting to abuse certain countries or less developed countries, especially because we're a bit of a, humanity. Anyway, but yes, there are definitely impacts, and it's a little bit scary. So I don't know how that's going to continue, because in a sense, it's also the money and the cost that's changing, right? So you may have seen that Claude has changed the pricing as well. So it's becoming more expensive. So of course, you're using a thing, you will need to pay for it. You like it, pay more. So that's one part, and then another part is, of course, the servers and everything. So it's a little, and the security, I think, is a big one. So in one of the slides, I had lethal trifecta. There's this term about data, and I think it's a very scary one, because I am seeing more and more security stuff, and AI is finding security problems. So I would say really be very suspicious, and especially the private data. Don't add the private data.
Okay, you are convincing. Adding to the compliments, fun fact, actually some time ago, Lina put some efforts to teach me Gen Z emojis. So this one probably from the same shelf. Lina, you slayed.
Oh, thank you.
Getting back to the questions, to that avatar feature that you implemented. So if the avatar feature wouldn't be valuable to the company, why you implemented it? If not, it's not AI problem, that was just poor planning.
It was, and it was exactly that exercise. Because in a sense, they gave us a website and said play around. So I just play around. They said make it well, make it pretty at least. You can put your avatar there. And someone else created the chat function. And they sort of liked it, but then I think I used a lot of tokens just to generate these Kahoot-like, avatars. And they turned out terrible the first time. It was just like colorful background and then dots and a smiley. And I was like, no, I want something like Kahoot. And then I went a few iterations, and it was a waste of tokens completely. But then later on, because I didn't understand the use case, that was my thing. There was some kind of board. And I was like, what is this? This is boring. So then I just skipped that and then did whatever I understood. But I think that, gets back to this idea, what is the right thing? That you should really specify. And then later on, I implemented a wish box. So then the leads could write what do they actually want. And then from that, it was very easy, because also smaller iterations, they had specific features that they wanted. That helped. But the avatar one, it was a waste of things. And it didn't look that good either, but experience.
Talking about planning and experimenting, more about experimenting probably, how your usage of AI changed since you experimented with it a lot?
I do think, like we were talking about skills, and the first idea for this talk, I was like, prompt me if you can, or like, how do you write a good skill actually? Because I think, we're talking about it, but what on earth is it? Well, skill MD, we say, it's markdown file. It's not some kind of science. It's just a list of certain texts, right, that you need to write down. And then each of us has a context. So all that context and giving direction to the agent, that is the power of the skills file. So right now, what I do is usually, first of all, if I'm testing a ticket and I give it to Claude, it tests it, then I ask it to create a skill for that same ticket. So then next time I run something, it's much faster. So that's, I think, the core kind of learning that I've had. And I think also for the cleanups it's very helpful. So you can just do analysis and say, okay, which are the duplicates, for example. For triaging, we're using it quite a lot. It helps a lot. But there are tasks where it's not that helpful, and it loops around, and it's just wasting the time, and then it's trying to find something, and it doesn't understand, and it's faster to do it for a human. But I would say skills or certain directions, guided kind of focus-specific task or like configuration, that's super helpful. Because we had this backend ticket that was waiting in a queue for 1 month, and none of us understood it because it was this long JSON file, and you had to know the configuration a lot. And I think within 15 minutes, it found a bug that was worth fixing. and it fixed it. And it actually provided us the curl commands, and then we could test very quickly and verify it got fixed. So I would say, yeah, sometimes even when you don't understand something, it can help you figure it out. But configuration and then creating skills that you can reuse yourself then, or share with your colleagues as well, so then they can reuse it and learn from your knowledge.
All right. So Slido questions are over. One last question from me. So what would you say for that kid that is standing besides that roller coaster and watching you are riding that roller coaster, and maybe he's just not there, afraid a bit, or finding excuses not to ride it?
Yeah, I think it's always scary to be bad at something. I started learning driving. I'm terrible. I don't understand the dimensions and anything. And I know that most people drive, right? And I'm like, am I that, miserable? Will I give up? But I think, and then I was like, I say that I like challenges, but do I? And I think as QAs, we say we like challenges, but do we actually like challenges? Are we continuously learning? Because I would say this is just learning. Just go and do some courses, and then it will be a bit better. If you're missing some information, it's fairly low risk, right? You don't need to do anything huge. You could vibe code something, I don't know, for your family, or grandma wants some kind of little thing, right? Or you want maybe an app that I saw somewhere that gives you a banner when you have 5 minutes to your next meeting, right? These are fairly simple projects. Don't be afraid to play around and get curious and learn things. And it's annoying, I know. And we're tired of transformations, but we are in one. So we should embrace it and just keep on learning. So yeah.
All right, I believe that's amazing. That's amazing way to end this ending keynote and overall this conference. So thank you, Lina, for stepping up for us, for accepting this challenge.
Thank you.